The moment Kyle walked through the door with a little girl cradled in his arms, I felt my stomach drop. I had seen her before, just in passing, but never like this. She wasn't some random child, she was familiar. And Kyle? He didn't say a word. No explanation, no warning, just silence. He simply walked in, set her down on the couch, and handed her his phone, putting on a show to keep her occupied. My heart pounded as I watched him move, his body tense, his expression unreadable. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I swallowed hard, my voice unsteady as I finally asked, "Kyle, what's going on?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he motioned for me to follow him into the bedroom, his movements deliberate, like he was bracing himself for something terrible. The way he looked at me sent shivers down my spine. My instincts screamed at me, whatever he was about to say would change everything. Once inside, he sat me down, taking a deep breath before finally speaking. "I love you," he said, his voice laced with desperation. "I need you to remember that, no matter what I say next." That was it. That was all I needed to hear to know. The child in the living room? She was his. But still, I sat there, gripping the edge of the bed, praying, foolishly, that there was some other explanation. That there was a mistake. Then he told me. It had started a week before our wedding. The realization had hit him like a ton of bricks. He was about to spend the rest of his life with just one person. He panicked. The night before the wedding, he had been seconds away from running, his bags packed, ready to disappear. But someone stopped him, Nikki. She had caught him in the parking lot, a cigarette between her fingers, mid-conversation on her phone. She saw his duffel bag, put the pieces together in an instant, and tried to talk him down. She climbed into the car with him, reassured him, told him that everything would be okay. But instead of calming him, it led to something else. Something reckless. Something irreversible. They kissed. I had always suspected Nikki had feelings for him. She had known him since high school, had always been a little too close, a little too familiar. But she was always kind to me, never gave me a reason to believe there was anything more than friendship between them. Still, my gut had whispered otherwise. And now, sitting here, listening to him, I realized my gut had been right all along. That night, fear turned into impulse, and impulse turned into a mistake, one that neither of them could take back. He slept with her. The night before our wedding. He told me he hadn't been thinking, that as soon as it was over, guilt consumed him. He left her room at 4 a.m., sneaking back into his own before anyone could notice. By the time I saw him at the altar, he was the same Kyle I had always known. No one had any idea what had happened, and as far as he and Nikki were concerned, it would stay that way. A mistake. A secret. Buried forever. But secrets have a way of coming back to haunt you. A few weeks later, Nikki called him. She was pregnant. And just like that, everything they had tried to forget came crashing back. They hadn't planned for this. They hadn't thought it through. But Nikki made her decision. She was keeping the baby. And Kyle? He had a choice. He could walk away and pretend none of it ever happened, or he could step up. He chose to be involved. While I was blissfully unaware, thinking my marriage was strong and unshakable, he was co-parenting behind my back. He attended her doctor's appointments, held her hand through the pregnancy, and when she gave birth, he was right there beside her. And the worst part? It was easy for him to hide it. Every time he needed to be with Nikki, he had a perfect excuse. "Work trip," he would say. And I believed him. I even congratulated Nikki when I found out she was expecting. She had come to our anniversary party, smiling, carrying a baby in her arms. A baby I had no idea was my husband's. But now, that baby was in my living room. And Kyle? He was expecting me to raise her. The party had been for my husband. That was the truth. But the story Nikki had told everyone? That was something entirely different. According to her, she had gotten pregnant after a fling with a man she met on a dating app, someone who wanted nothing to do with her or the baby. She painted the picture of a single mother bravely raising her child alone, and it was a story so believable, so heartbreakingly ordinary, that no one questioned it. Her daughter looked like any other child, nothing particularly striking about her features. Certainly nothing that would have made me connect the dots back then. Nikki and Kyle had stayed in touch even after our wedding. She had even been to our home multiple times. Looking back, I had never noticed anything strange about the way they interacted. No lingering glances, no hushed conversations, no awkward tension. It was easy for them to deceive me because, in my eyes, there was nothing to suspect. Nikki rarely brought her daughter along, so I had only ever seen pictures of her. That's why, when Kyle brought the little girl into our home recently, I hadn't recognized her. But then he dropped the truth like a bomb. He had been supporting them all along, sneaking away whenever he could just to be near his daughter. He swore to me that nothing was going on between him and Nikki anymore. That their affair had been a one-time mistake, a lapse in judgment the night before our wedding. He insisted there had never been anything before or after, just that single night. But still, he had stayed in contact with her because of their parental agreement. They shared custody, and he was paying child support. He claimed he couldn't just walk away from his own daughter. Then, he delivered another devastating blow. Nikki had died a month ago. A horrific accident. A drunk truck driver had smashed into her car, taking her life in an instant. Since then, their daughter had been staying with Nikki's parents. But Kyle had decided that it was finally time for the truth. He wanted me to accept her. To step up as a mother. To become a family with him and the child he had fathered behind my back. I sat there, absorbing it all, feeling like my world had been ripped apart. But then he said the one thing that pushed me over the edge. He actually expected me to raise this child as my own. As if his betrayal could be undone. As if I could just erase the fact that he had cheated on me with his so-called friend mere hours before pledging his life to me. That was it. That was the moment I lost it. I screamed. I raged. I told him there was no way in hell I would ever accept either of them. His betrayal was something I could never forgive. And the fact that he even thought I might? That he had the audacity to ask? It only proved how selfish, how delusional he was. My entire body trembled with fury as I hurled whatever was within reach across the room. I had a complete meltdown, an outpouring of every ounce of pain and betrayal surging through me. And all the while, he just stood there, trying to calm me down with empty words, telling me we could work this out. That I was just angry, that I didn't really mean what I was saying. But I did. He pleaded, saying his daughter wasn't to blame. That she was just as much as she was Nikki's. That in time, I would come to accept her. I told him I didn't blame the child. Of course, none of this was her fault, but that didn't change the fact that he had cheated. That he had lied to me for years. And now he expected me to just welcome them with open arms? Absolutely not. I told him to pack his things and leave. I wanted him out of my house, and I wasn't going to change my mind. Still, he tried to manipulate me. Tried to guilt-trip me. He reminded me of the vows we had taken, the promises we had made. How I had sworn to stand by him through thick and thin. But I shot back that those vows had been shattered the moment he betrayed me. The moment he stood at the altar, looking me in the eyes, and said words he had already made meaningless. I hadn't signed up for this. I had signed up for a husband, not a cheater with a secret family. He kept pushing, refusing to accept my decision. But he couldn't argue against one unshakable fact: the house was mine. A wedding gift from my father. Legally, he had no claim to it, and I had every right to throw him out. After a long, heated back and forth, he finally caved and started packing. He was furious, devastated even, but I didn't care. The truth was, if Nikki hadn't died, he probably never would have told me. He would have gone on pretending, letting me live a lie. And even now, I had no way of knowing if his version of events was the full story. Had it really been just one night? Or had their affair gone on far longer than he admitted? Nikki was gone, and with her, any hope of getting real answers. But none of that mattered anymore. Because I was done. As he gathered his things, he accused me of being heartless. Of throwing him and his daughter out without a shred of compassion. And for the first time that night, a flicker of doubt crept in. A small, unwanted whisper of guilt. But then, his daughter had no clue what was unfolding around her. She was just an innocent little girl, caught in the aftermath of something she never asked for. She didn't deserve any of this. But I knew, deep down, I knew she would be okay. Kyle wasn't struggling financially, he had options. If he couldn't stay here, he'd find a hotel or crash with his parents. One way or another, he'd land on his feet, and she'd be safe with him. She just wouldn't be living under my roof anymore. And I don't believe for a second that makes me heartless. Before he stepped out, I looked him in the eye, my voice firm despite the storm raging inside me. "Maybe this will teach you a lesson about honesty," I said. "If you ever get married again, maybe you'll think twice before lying to your wife about something this massive." Then, without another word, I slammed the door in his face. I watched through the peephole as he stood outside, waiting for a cab. My hands were trembling, but I refused to break, not yet. Only when I was certain he was gone did I finally let myself collapse. The sobs tore through me, relentless, suffocating. I cried until I had nothing left. I called my parents. I told them everything. They didn't hesitate. They told me I wasn't alone, that I didn't have to go through this in an empty house filled with broken promises. They offered to take me in or move in with me, whatever I needed. And so, for the past few days, they've been here, filling the space Kyle left behind. It's been almost 2 weeks. And I still haven't filed for divorce. Not because I don't want to, but because I don't have the strength to do it yet. Kyle, though, he's been relentless. Texting me every day. Apologizing. Pleading. Acting as if this was some minor misunderstanding that I should just brush off. He keeps insisting that I shouldn't let this little mistake ruin everything we built. A little mistake? He lied to me for years. Years. This wasn't some late-night slip-up. This wasn't an impulsive, one-time betrayal. This was a deliberate deception that shattered the foundation of our marriage. And yet, he expects me to move past it. He's downplaying everything because he's afraid of losing me. I get that. But what his parents are doing? That's worse. They've decided I'm the villain in this story. A couple of days ago, they sent me a long email. A letter packed with accusations, disappointment, and outright manipulation. They called me selfish, cold-hearted, unforgiving. But the worst part? They had the audacity to suggest that, since Nikki was gone, I had no reason to be upset anymore. As if her death erased the betrayal. As if the fact that she was no longer in this world meant Kyle and I could magically patch things up and pretend none of it ever happened. And then, the most unbelievable part, the part that made my stomach turn. They said that, since Nikki's daughter was now alone, the right thing for me to do would be to adopt her and raise her as my own. Let that sink in. They expected me to welcome the child of my husband's affair with open arms and live out some fantasy where we all became a happy, blended family. They painted me as cruel for refusing. They called me heartless for standing up for myself. And they outright labeled me the villain for not giving in. I don't understand how I'm the bad guy in this. For years, I did everything a good wife should. I supported Kyle, I loved him, I fought for our marriage. But this is too much. I cannot forgive. I cannot forget. The betrayal alone was bad enough. But the fact that Nikki, his mistress, had sat at my table, laughed in my home, had conversations with me while hiding this secret, that is something I can never get past. The sheer level of disrespect makes my skin crawl. And yet, Kyle expects me to just accept it. I feel bad for his daughter. None of this is her fault. But I will not sacrifice my self-respect. That email, though, it shook me. Not because it changed my mind, but because it made me realize something. I'm done. I don't care what his parents think. I don't care what Kyle wants. I just want to move forward. But I don't know how to talk about this with my friends. Not yet. So, I have to ask, am I truly the villain for throwing my husband out after he dropped this bombshell on me and expected me to just accept it? Update 1. The outpouring of support has been overwhelming. I can't begin to express how much it means to me. Thanks to my parents, and all of you, I'm staying strong. I told them everything. The affair. The child. The expectations Kyle had for me. And their response? Pure rage. My father, in particular, was furious. He never liked Kyle. Thought he was too unreliable, too aimless. A man who bounced from job to job, never committing to anything long enough to build real stability. I had always defended him. Always insisted he was just figuring things out. Turns out, my dad saw right through him. And now? My parents are helping me find the best divorce attorney in town. Because this marriage? It's beyond saving. Kyle can apologize all he wants. It changes nothing. Some wounds never heal, no matter how much time passes. And I know now, this is one of them. Update 2. It's been 2 weeks since I last posted. 4 days ago, I finally did it. I filed for divorce. My dad found me an incredible lawyer, one of the best in town. And honestly, I'm grateful. Because now, this process will likely work out in my favor. Kyle can try to fight it. He can hire the best attorney in the country if he wants. It won't change the facts. He cheated. And nothing, no amount of legal maneuvering, no heartfelt apologies, can erase that. But this morning, something happened. Kyle showed up. And what he did next, I still can't believe it. Served with divorce papers, and he did not take it well. Not one bit. Ever since he got kicked out, my phone has been flooded with his messages, pleas, apologies, manipulative little attempts to win me back. But today, something must have clicked in his mind. Maybe he finally understood that I was never coming back. And instead of accepting it with dignity, instead of walking away with even a shred of grace, he decided to cause a spectacle. Right in front of my house. I guess he's been living with his parents, there's no other explanation. And I am beyond grateful that his daughter wasn't with him when he showed up. No child should have had to witness what happened next. He stood on the street, screaming my name, calling me every insult he could muster. Told me I was the worst mistake of his life, that he regretted ever marrying me. And then, as if his words weren't already sharp enough, he brought up Nikki. Said he should have never married me. That he should have called off the wedding and been with her instead. And then, oh, this part was truly insane, he blamed me for her death. Yes. You read that right. He actually stood there and said that if I hadn't been his wife, he would have been with Nikki. That they would have had a life together. That she would still be alive today. That his daughter would still have a mother. As if I had anything to do with the tragic accident that took her life. As if I had some hand in the fact that a drunk truck driver plowed into her car. It was beyond delusional. It was terrifying. I knew then, this wasn't just anger. This was a breakdown. Something inside him had snapped. I didn't argue. I didn't try to reason with him. What would have been the point? Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed the police. Meanwhile, my neighbors, drawn out by the commotion, started calling me, texting me, trying to figure out what the hell was happening. They recognized his voice. Of course, they did. They had known us as a couple, had seen us at barbecues, holiday parties, walking down this very street. And now they were witnessing this complete unraveling. The police arrived in 15 minutes. By then, he had stepped onto my property, his feet crushing the flowers in my garden. That was enough for them to take action. They escorted him off, firmly but without force. I could have had him arrested. Pressed charges. I had every right to. But I didn't. Not because he didn't deserve it, oh, he absolutely did, but because I didn't want the extra drama. His family would have made it an ordeal. They always do. And I just wanted peace. He walked away with a warning. And I could tell, somewhere deep down, he was ashamed of himself. But not enough. Because I knew this wasn't the end. I could feel it. Today, I finally made it public. The divorce. I posted about it on social media, not because I wanted attention, but because people kept asking. Friends who hadn't seen me and Kyle together in months. People who had no idea what was going on. I kept the details vague, just a simple announcement. I thought that would be the end of it. But then something happened. Something I never expected. Nikki's parents reached out. They told me they had been waiting for this. Checking my profile every day, watching, waiting for the moment I would finally confirm that I was leaving him. And when the post went up, they finally felt they could tell me the truth. They texted me from Nikki's phone. That alone sent a chill down my spine. For a split second, it felt like she herself was reaching out from beyond. But of course, it was them. And what they told me changed everything. Kyle had lied. Again. That one night with Nikki before our wedding? The affair that was supposedly over before it even began? A complete fabrication. He had been with her the entire time. Every other weekend. Secret rendezvous. Lies upon lies upon lies. He told her he loved her. told her he would leave me. He promised her a future. And the entire time, he was still playing the perfect husband to me. He even took her on weekend getaways. Multiple times. For 2 years. 2 years. I felt sick. Not just at the betrayal, but at the realization of how easily he had fooled me. How he had been setting me up to be the fool yet again. And if Nikki were still alive, maybe he would have continued this game indefinitely. But now, she was gone. And the truth had nearly been buried with her. If I had never made that post, her parents never would have reached out. And I never would have known. I asked them one thing: if it came down to it, would they testify? Would they stand with me in court? Without hesitation, they agreed. They had never approved of Kyle. Not because of their daughter's involvement in an affair, but because of what he had done to both of us. If he had just been honest, ended things with me before marrying me, maybe it would have been different. Maybe there would have been a sliver of decency in that choice. But instead, he wanted everything. His marriage. His affair. His pristine reputation. He was too much of a coward to be the bad guy, so he played us both. And when Nikki got pregnant, he resented it. He resented her. He resented everything that forced him to make a real choice. And yet, he still kept stringing her along. Making promises. Telling her he would leave me. Up until a week before she died, he was still feeding her the same lies. Now, he never has to follow through. And I bet, deep down, he's relieved. The only reason he came clean to me at all was because Nikki's parents were threatening to tell me themselves. He realized that if he controlled the narrative, he had a better chance of twisting it to his advantage. But I see him for who he really is now. And I will make sure he gets what he deserves. My lawyer already knows everything. And now, it's war.